The Zach Bagans Haunted Museum is actually haunted. A few months ago, my friend told me that she was going to Vegas with her husband, a few friends, and she asked me what I would recommend for her to do while they were out there because I had been to Vegas a few times. And of course, I recommended the Zach Bagans Haunted Museum. My husband and I had been there about 2 or 3 times, and I had told her about our experience. It was horrific, it was scary. I have a video on my page, so if you're interested in listening to my story, my video is on here. But I told her about it, and she loves all things spooky, but just like everyone else, she's a I have to see it to believe it type of person. So I'm telling her my story, I'm telling her what happened, what we witnessed, and she's like, okay, well, I hope that I see some sort of spookiness, whatever. Her and her friends go and they have a great time. She said that her friend, who is also a lover of all things spooky, kind of chickened out on a few of the exhibits because it was just too much for her. And honestly, I get it because there were some that I was like, holy shit. She does want to stay anonymous, but in one of our conversations, she did mention that on their way back, she felt this heaviness around her home that she had never felt before. Things started to happen after they got back in town from their trip after they visited the Zeg Biggins Haunted Museum. She said that one of her friends that had been with her boyfriend for about 10 years suddenly split. One of her other friends that also went with them had 2 family members pass away within 3 months of them coming back, and they were pretty healthy. Some stuff was also happening to her, and she doesn't know if this was because of the energy that the Zach Biggins Haunted Museum carries, kind of followed them, or if it's just pure coincidence. And honestly, I feel like there is never coincidence. Things always happen for a reason. This specific reason was because they went to a very highly haunted place that has so many spirits, different types of energies, and I feel like something followed them back. Now, not many people think the way I do, and that is perfectly okay, but have any of you ever visited the Zach Bagans Haunted Museum? And if you did, what was your experience coming back? Did you witness anything? Did anything crazy or out of the ordinary happen to you or your family? Because that place is heavy. Let me know what you guys think. And also, if you guys like all things spooky, scary, paranormal, and true crime, please make sure you follow.
This allegedly true story is about a haunted farm just north of Toronto, but it's kind of more than just the, oh, we felt a presence type haunted story, and it comes full circle at the end, and you'll see what I mean. This came from someone named B. B says she grew up in the 1980s, and along with her house in this city, her parents owned a 156-acre farm that was just about an hour north of Toronto. Along with the acreage, the farm had a massive building that the family ran their family business from, and then it had several barns built in the 1880s and a giant farmhouse built in 1970. The farmhouse was occupied to a man that the family rented it to, who was a paramedic who worked overnights. That man that they rented to was often on the property, but aside from him, there was usually nobody else there. So after B turns 16, she gets her license, and one night her mom realized that she had left her purse up at the building that they use as an office at the farm. So B, wanting to drive the family car because she had just gotten her license, was like, I'll go back and get it. It was dark out, but she wasn't scared. She had never experienced anything weird there before. So she makes the drive, gets there safely, and she said that once you got to the farm, the driveway up from the main road to the farm was about a mile long, and it was surrounded by fields on both sides, stretching about a half mile in either direction. That night, she said she turned onto the driveway from the main road and just the energy felt off. It just felt different. And she had never been scared there before. But she keeps along and she passes the house that the tenant is occupied, but she sees that his car's not there, so he must be working. All the lights are off, so she keeps on and she heads for the main building. And as she approaches the main building, she sees out in one of the fields, there seem to be 2 figures walking with what look like lanterns. It was a pretty remote area. They owned 156 acres, so there wasn't like there were any other houses around. So she's watching them like, who is this? She's sitting in her car, the car's idling, she's watching them for a minute, and then they disappear from her view because they walk behind the main house. She's waiting for them to come out the other side, but they didn't. They just disappeared. So she runs in the building, she grabs her mom's purse, and she hauls back to the house. She tells her parents, all freaked out when she gets home, what she saw, and her parents just kind of play it off. They're like, there was nobody out there. It must have been your eyes playing tricks on you, and her dad jokingly suggests it's time she gets new glasses. Fast forward, she graduates high school, she goes to college, she eventually moves out of the country for a job, and she's gone for 11 years. Eventually, her father's health started to fail, and she decided it was time to move back to Canada with her new husband, and she was also pregnant with her first child at the time. He decided she was going to take over the family business because her mom was struggling to handle everything while also caring for her dad. So they moved back to Canada. She said they moved into the farmhouse. And on the first night of the farmhouse, she has this horrible, vivid dream. She said it was one of those lucid dreams in which you feel like you're awake, but she knew she was dreaming. But she opens her eyes, her husband's sleeping next to her, and she sees a man and a little girl standing at the end of the bed. And the man starts explaining, he says, "This is me and my daughter. We live here too. My daughter's 6. Her name is Caroline. We're not here to hurt you. We just live here too. We died in a house fire." Basically just says, "We're just here to see what kind of person you are, and we assure you we're not here to harm you." She said she woke up bawling. It was just so sad. It was so horrible, especially seeing this little girl. And she said after that, she didn't have any more nightmares, but she did notice like lights would turn on and off, but she just figured it was an old house. She would hear light tapping, but figured it was house noises. Sometimes there were more discernible sounds like someone knocking. Nothing so scary that it wasn't something that she could just dismiss. She said they were just everyday noises. So a few months later, she gives birth to her first daughter. Fast forward a few years, her daughter's a toddler. She had just given birth to a second child, and she was in the process of a divorce from her husband. At that point, her dad had sadly passed away, her husband had moved out, and so Bee's mom moved into the farmhouse to help Bee out with the kids. One day, Bee and her mom are in the kitchen just talking, and her daughter's in the living room, which kind of opens up to the kitchen, and they're watching her kind of out of the corner of their eye when they notice that her little girl stands up and starts dancing and talking to someone. Bee's mom says it looks like she's playing with someone. And so Bee just kind of casually calls in there. She goes, "Honey, who are you playing with?" And her daughter looks at her and says, "Caroline." Now, mind you, they didn't know anyone named Caroline, so this was completely shocking to Bee. She looks at her mom completely horrified and then tells her about the dream. Mom's intrigued, and so she suggests that they do some research at the town records center, town hall, whatever town offices where the records are kept. And they find that there was an original house built in the same position as that current farmhouse, but it had sadly burnt down. But it was built in 1880 originally, along with those barns. He says they lived with Caroline and her father for years. She didn't personally see them again, but her daughter would often talk to Caroline, play with Caroline. Bee and her mother eventually sold the farm when her daughter turned 6, but she said her daughter's 11 now and still remembers Caroline vividly. If you're new here, this is Spooky Scary Storytime, the series where I share listeners' allegedly true stories about the creepiest or most unbelievable things that they've ever experienced. So if you have a story, please feel free to send it in. We would love to read it. The story gave me the creeps, okay? It's called Was It Marshall? And it was sent in by someone named Emily, who said this story takes place sometime between 2009 and 2012. She doesn't remember the exact year, but she knows she was in high school. And her family had just bought this house in Upper St. Clair, which is a suburb of Pittsburgh. And she said she's over 30 now, but the story still gives her the creeps. So to give you a little bit of an overview of how the house was set up, it was a small ranch. It had a full basement and an attached garage. It was like sort of under the back of the house. And the house had been built in 1952. It was one of the original houses on the street. It didn't really fit in with the modern mansions that surrounded it, but it was the first house that her family could afford to buy. They were happy to be there, even though the house kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. And they bought the house as is, with some of the original owner's items still there. And they came to find out that he was an older man who was a Vietnam veteran. His name was Marshall, and he was single. He had never married, never had a family. They found all kinds of paperwork related to Marshall's life in a small storage room that was attached to the garage. This storage room was packed hoarder style with everything from Marshall's life. But one of the first renovations they wanted to do to the house was to turn that little storage room into a workshop for her dad. They start going through the room, and at first everything is just kind of boring. It's just paperwork. There's some Vietnam War memorabilia, which was super interesting to both of her parents because they're both ex-military. But then they come across some things that seem a little bit stranger. There's women's jewelry, there's children's toys, and they're like, oh, this is weird. And then they come across a jar of human ears. It looked old in like an antique jar, so they're like, that's weird. They get rid of everything and they just continue on with the renovation. But she said they're a spiritual family and they probably should have known better. Once they finish the renovations to this workshop, they start with the renovations upstairs. And she said that the hallway and the bedrooms had this horrible orange shag carpet, and the doors had hook-style handles, like, you know, the kind that catches your belt loop when you're already having a bad day. So they removed the orange shag carpet, but now the house isn't level. And she said that there was now a 2-inch gap underneath her door. And because the house wasn't level, her door would either be completely closed or completely open. Her bedroom door wasn't latched closed. It would swing violently open and hit the wall with a thud. Keep this in mind. Emily said when they started the renovations, there was like a noticeable shift in the energy of the house. And they joked that it was Marshall because, again, they are a spiritual family. So, for instance, her dad would be laying in bed at night and their bedroom was above the shop in the garage. He would hear old music playing from what sounded like an old radio down in the shop. So he would yell, "Marshall, shut it off." And the music would stop. There were other things, like everybody in the family sometimes noticed that they felt watched or they would see shadows out of the corner of their eye, but when they turned, there was nobody there. She said even if you were alone in the house, you never felt alone. You felt like there was another presence there, but it never felt threatening or heavy or ominous, so they just thought it was Marshall. She said we just lived like this for a few years. And then as she gets further into high school, the problems start. She starts having trouble at school. She went into some details that I don't think she wanted me to share, but she basically just said that she became kind of a problem child. Emily said she started having night terrors around this time, and she would wake up at 3 in the morning almost every night. She would be paralyzed, unable to move, and she would look up at the ceiling and see this smoky, demon-like creature coming down from her ceiling from where like the attic access was. This she knew was not Marshall, but she said that she always just would fall back asleep, and then when she woke up again before the sun came up, she would go out into the living room and fall back asleep where she felt safer. One weekend morning, she's laying in bed. She hadn't slept well because she'd had her normal nightmares. And it's about 6 in the morning, and she's laying staring at her door, and she notices the handle, which remember is the hook style, the handle turns to the upright position, and it cracks open about 6 inches. She said the way that it would if a parent were to lean in and check on their sleeping child. She knew that somebody was on the other side of the door holding it open, looking at her, because again, her door would have swung open had it not been restrained by something. But she said her dad was a prankster, and it was not beyond him to pull a prank on her occasionally. So she snuck out of bed. Her plan was to yank the door open and actually scare her dad, but when she yanked the door open, there was nobody there. She stands there for a few seconds confused, and then she's like, no, that was my dad. So she sees that her parents' door is closed. She goes into their room and she sees them both asleep in bed. Her mom is snoring, her dad's on his side. So she walks over to his side thinking he's pretending to be asleep, and she's like, Dad, that's not cool. You know I have night terrors, whatever. He goes, what are you talking about? Apparently he had been asleep. It wasn't him that opened her door. It was just the 3 of them in the house at that point because her sister had gone off to college already. So her dad just kind of laughs it off. He said, oh, it must have been Marshall. They just accept that as the explanation. But a few weeks later, her sister comes back from college and she's visiting. She's home for a holiday. And when her sister gets home, she's like, have you guys had any more Marshall activity? Because it's just a common talking point. Emily's like, oh yeah, the door thing. And she's standing in her room and she's telling her sister this story when, as she mentions Marshall's name, her bedroom mirror shatters. They lived in that house until the summer of 2012 when they sold the house. And there were no other big events in the house. But after they moved out, her nightmares miraculously stopped. More interesting thing to note about the house is that she said the person who bought the house now keeps it as a long-term rental for tenants, but the current owner has had trouble keeping tenants even though the house is in an impeccable school district and the area has an extremely low crime rate. So now she's curious, do you think it was Marshall playing these pranks on them, or do you think they disturbed something darker when clearing out all of his memorabilia? She'll be in the comments. Emily's her real name. If you have a spooky, scary story time that you think nobody else would believe, something unbelievable, or that you've been too afraid to share, send it in. We would love to hear it.
Have you heard of the Okanagan Mountains? Because it sounds very similar to the Appalachian Mountains, just in Canada. Well, this girl said that she moved there with her family, and this creature was coming into her room every night. This story gave me the chills all over. This happened a few years ago, shortly after Kylie and her family moved into a rural area of Canada's Okanagan. So she moved there with her parents and her 2 younger sisters, and before they moved there, they had actually heard that this particular area had a reputation of paranormal activity, very similar to the Appalachian Mountains. It wasn't until after they moved there that their neighbors just casually warned them like it was common sense about the local stories. They mentioned strange sightings, creatures that are also in the Appalachian Mountains. If you put 2 and 2 together, gave them a list of rules. Keep your curtains shut at night. Never open the door if you hear knocking. Never respond to voices you don't recognize, etc. Her bedroom was downstairs ground level with a single window facing the backyard. She always slept with her door closed, although she never locked it. And almost every single night, she started to hear whistling outside of her window. At first, she just kind of convinced herself that it was just the wind like weaving through the trees. The mountains, she said, were pretty loud at night. One night, she hears the whistling and something is different. It didn't feel like it was coming from outside. It sounded closer. It sounded like it was inside. She feels herself wake up, but every instinct in her body is screaming at her not to move. So she's just laying there, frozen, in the darkness, just staring at nothing, when suddenly she realizes there's something standing at the end of her bed. There was this figure standing there. It was male, unnaturally thin, with limbs unnaturally long for its body. She couldn't make out a face, just a tall, narrow, long silhouette that did not belong in her room. As she's staring at it, it starts pacing slowly back, forth, and back and forth, never moving away from the end of her bed as if it were deciding something. And as this creature is going back and forth at the end of her bed, she's continuously hearing soft but deliberate whistling. Now, after what felt like forever, it turns, walks out of her room, and leaves the door wide open. She said that she stayed awake for hours, not daring to even move or breathe too loudly. When she finally gathered up enough courage, she bolted upstairs to her younger sister's room and just begged her to sleep in her room. Now, her younger sister is like, you're imagining things, you're just stressed out, like, chill out. So the next morning, she goes downstairs and she asks her mom if she had heard anything come into her room that night. Her mother says no and suggested that it might be a dream. And at this point, Kylie is like, okay, well, was it dad? But then her mom reminded her that her dad had been called into work early that night. He was a paramedic. He had not been home. And why would he be pacing at the end of her bed whistling? So she tries to convince herself that she's imagining this. But then the next night, she hears it again. She wakes up and she looks over at her door and it's wide open, even though she distinctly remembers locking it before she went to sleep. For weeks after that, she would lock her door every single night, and every single morning without fail, she would wake up to it wide open. Strangely enough, at this point, she did not feel like it was trying to hurt her, so she ignored it. At this point, she's just telling herself that acknowledging it is just going to make it worse. But about a year later, something happened that shattered that belief. She was home alone one evening, sick, while her family was visiting a neighbor. Hoping to ease her symptoms, she decided to take a bath. Now, the bath and the shower were combined, separated from the rest of the bathroom by a curtain. So she's just chilling in the bath, not feeling very good, when at some point she must have fallen asleep in the warm water. She's sleeping in the warm water when again, she opens up her eyes. The bathroom lights are off. Yet she can clearly see the outline of that thin, tall man on the other side of the curtain. And slowly, impossibly slowly, his long, bony fingers wrapped around the edge of the shower curtain. Panic seized her. She could not breathe. It felt like the air was sucked out of the room. She squeezed her eyes shut as tight as she could, and she pinched her nose, and she went as far down underwater as she could possibly go. And she stayed there until her lungs burned. Literally thought she was going to pass out, until finally she comes up above water and she looks around and he's gone. The lights are back on and the bathroom left normal again. Since that night, she hears whistling constantly. Sometimes it's distant and sometimes it's right behind her. When it's dark, no matter where she is, she sees the outline of that man watching. And to this day, no one believes her experience is true. No. I don't like that at all. I don't like the fact that he was pacing at the end of her bed. She was right to think that he was like contemplating something. That is so freaky to me. And why was he only bothering her? And what was it? What was it? Why was he so skinny and tall? I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I don't like when things are tall and thin. You know? At least it was a man. I don't know what it is about females being like tall and thin. I think that whenever I experience anything paranormal, that whatever evil it is knows what scares me the most. I truly believe that like evil does know what scares you the most, and it will replicate that, right? It will manifest that so that you see it. Because like the scariest things I could possibly picture, I have either seen like in my dreams or seen in sleep paralysis, or seen like, I haven't seen that much in waking life. I haven't seen that much. I've heard things before, but I have in sleep paralysis. And oh yeah, tall, skinny women, I see that and it freaks me out. So much so. So anyways, what do you guys think about that story? What do you think it was? Number one, has anyone heard of that area of Canada? I know that the Appalachian Mountains are also in Canada. I looked this up. This is not the Appalachian Mountains, but like the folklore or the everything about it seems very similar. Like the rules and what people see there, it just seems kind of connected somehow, doesn't it? I don't know. I don't like it. But let me know what your thoughts are. But please, as always, be respectful. This is a person sharing her story. Okay. I'm so tired. Can you tell? Like loopy. I need to go to sleep. Okay, but now I'm going to do my favorite part, which is the shout-outs. Sammy1225, you said that you and your husband watch me. Yes! You guys know how much I love that. I love it when families or couples watch me. It just makes me so happy to, like, bring people together like that. So, hello, hubby, and hello, Sammy. I'm assuming that's your name, Samantha, because I saw it, you know, in your... that's what like your nickname is on TikTok. Thank you so much for what you said. You said that I was one of your favorites, and I appreciate that so much. And you searched for me. You have no idea how much that means to me. I'm so lucky to have you here. Thank you for being a part of my community, and thank you for being kind and watching my videos, and thank you for showing me to your husband so that he now watches me as well. I love it when people share the love. It means so much. I'm so tired. I cannot tell you how much that means to me and how much your comment meant to me. It seriously made me smile, and those comments really do make my day. So thank you so much. I love you, girl. Naomi Paget, you said that you loved my videos so freaking much, and that you binge watch them every week. I love that so freaking much. Thank you so much for telling me that, number one, and thank you for doing that. Thank you. I would not have this page without people like you. I really wouldn't. It wouldn't, like, you guys mean so much to me, you have no idea. When I see comments like that, it just keeps me going. Even when I'm tired, like, it just keeps me going. I love this page so much. It means more to me than you guys even understand. And, like, again, it's people like you that make me love it so much. It's not even just the storytelling. I love telling stories, but it's you guys that I love more. So thank you for being one of those people. Thank you for being a part of my community. Thank you for telling me that and being kind. Thank you for commenting and pushing out my videos and binge watching my videos. You have no idea how much it means to me. I hope you know how much I appreciate you as an individual. I love you, girl. And thank you so much to both of you for being spooky babies. And with that being said, my name is Kaisa, and I tell your paranormal experiences on here or ones that you recommend to me every single night. So if you're into that, hit that follow button. And I just need you to do 3 things for me. And what are those? Keep sending me your scary stories. Have a safe night. And what's the third one? Say it with me. Have a spooky night. Love you so much, my spooky babies. I'll see you in the next one. Spooky kisses and haunted hugs.
Let's read another true and scary story. The night my friends and I almost died. I've never told anyone this story in real life. Not my parents, not my friends. It's been 3 years and I still don't know if the man in the field was just watching us or waiting for something worse to happen. This happened about 3 years ago, and at the time I didn't know who to tell or talk to because I was in complete shock. So the 2 friends I was with that night and I decided to keep it to ourselves. I had 2 friends, let's call them Zach and Jake. One random day we were bored, so we decided to host a party at Zach's house over the weekend. He had a big house, a huge backyard, and a pool, so it was perfect. It was also the weekend right before spring break, and his parents were out of town, which made it even better. When the day of the party arrived, we met up hours earlier to set everything up. Later that night, around 80 people showed up, and even more came after. That's when the drinking started. Around 1:30 a.m., people began heading home, but me, Zach, and Jake still had a lot of energy left. I should mention that Zach's house was the last one in his neighborhood. Behind his backyard was a massive cornfield, stretching about a mile long. I don't remember the exact distance. There were no houses behind it, just fields. Zach also had a gate in his backyard that led directly into the cornfield. Zach owned a Can-Am. It had 2 seats, but someone could stand on the back. Around 2 a.m., the 3 of us had the bright idea to take it into the field while blasting music. I was driving, Zach was in the passenger seat, and Jake was standing on the back. We cruised around the field for about 30 minutes before getting bored and deciding to head back. We decided to take one last turn. Halfway through the field, a man suddenly appeared. He looked around 60 years old, with gray hair, wearing a vest, and holding a hunting rifle with a scope. It was hard to see him clearly because it was pitch black. The only light came from the Can-Am's headlights. We passed him without stopping. About 500 feet later, the Can-Am suddenly shut off by itself, even though the keys were still in the ignition. My heart dropped. We were still close enough that he could see or hear us, but when we looked back, he was gone. After a few seconds, which felt like minutes, the Can-Am finally turned back on. We didn't say a word, we just drove straight back toward the house without looking back. Before going inside, we stopped to catch our breath and process what had just happened. That's when we heard a loud bang and something metal hit the Can-Am. We froze. A second later, we heard another shot ring out and something whizzed past us. That was enough. We jumped back on the Can-Am and sped home. We drove through the backyard, parked it, ran inside the house, and locked every door and window we could. We turned off every light inside and outside the house. Zach had security cameras, so we went into the room with the monitors showing the backyard and the front of the house. That's when things got even worse. A car slowly drove through the backyard area and stopped. Its headlights stayed on. It just sat there, idling, for about 15 minutes. We didn't recognize the car and no one got out. We stayed completely silent, watching the monitors, afraid to even move. Eventually, the car drove away. We didn't sleep that night. What scared us the most was trying to understand why an elderly man would be standing in the middle of a cornfield at 2:30 in the morning, and how a car could have been so close to the house shortly after. The next morning, we checked Google Maps to see where the man could have come from. There were no houses, no shelters, nothing anywhere near the cornfield. That means he was either staying out there or he had been watching us the entire time during the party. We never told our parents or anyone else. 3 years have passed since then, and the 3 of us have gone our separate ways and don't talk much anymore. But it's a night I'll never forget, and one I still think about every time I hear something outside late at night. My only thought would be like maybe this is the owner of the cornfield and they heard the teenagers driving around the field, but they already said that there weren't any like houses or farms or structures or anything around the cornfield, so it's kind of crazy. But honestly, owner or not, if you're out in a cornfield and you're seeing teenagers driving around in a Can-Am, why would you shoot at them? Especially since someone is standing on the car. Like, you have to be a straight up psychotic man to do that. This is so scary, and I'm really glad that the person who posted this seems to be okay, other than being obviously like traumatized from the experience. As always, if you guys have any personal stories or stories in general you'd like me to share, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can, and I will see you in the next one.
I saw a demon outside of a church during a hurricane and wrote a report about it for school. Story time. So it's September of 96. I'm 11 years old in the 5th grade when our teacher tells us a major hurricane is approaching the coast and she wants us to write a very detailed report on it. We had to give a good description of what we saw before, during, and after the storm, so I was excited because I love to write. Living in North Carolina, we get a lot of these storms and people tend to underestimate them, and that's what happened with this storm. Everybody thought it was going to weaken and turn away. But that ain't what happened. By the end of the day, Hurricane Fran hit some hot water, blew the hell up, and became a Category 4 and was now barreling towards our coast. We just didn't know where it was going to hit. Well, we lived in a small trailer, and typically during a Category 1 or 2 storm, we'd just stay at my grandma's house, but because Fran was so much stronger, we had to find somewhere safer, so we went to a brick church. And we had about 8 or 9 families all piled up in this tiny church, so we buckled down and just hoped for the best. We really felt better when we found out Hurricane Fran had dropped down to a Category 3. Yes, still very dangerous, but not a Category 4. Everything was okay up until we learned that Fran had picked up speed and had now turned and was going to make a direct landfall over our county, which meant the eye of the storm was coming right over us. Which also meant we were going to be hit by the strongest winds that were now reaching up to 140 miles per hour. Then the power went out, so no more TV. Now we're solely depending on a radio that runs off D batteries, and we're running out of batteries. People were really starting to panic because we didn't have Wi-Fi and cell phones back then. All we had was TV and radio, and that was no damn good when the power went out. We literally didn't know what was going to happen until it happened, and by then it was too late to do anything. So Hurricane Fran makes direct landfall, and the church is shaking. I mean, the windows are steady pushing in and out. The roof is starting to lift up and down. Heavy downpours, thunder and lightning, wind gusts, but the scariest thing was how the walls sounded like they were breathing. If you've heard that sound, then you know how creepy it is. So when it started getting bad, one of the adults said, look, before it gets worse, if you kids need to use the bathroom, we need to go ahead and go. Let's go now. Only problem was, this church's bathroom was located outside in a separate building, so we had to go out of the storm to use the damn bathroom. The 90s. Now this bathroom did not have stalls. It was just one room with a toilet. So all of us went into the bathroom together and we just turned the other way. While the last kid is using the bathroom, we're lined up in front of the door holding the door shut because of the wind gust, when all of a sudden the wind blows the door open and we can't get it shut back. During all this commotion, me and another girl get shoved outside the bathroom door, and the door slams in between us and the other people, so now we're locked outside and they're inside. She runs to the church through the side door, shuts it, it locks, and doesn't tell anyone that we're out there, so they're locked in the bathroom and I'm locked outside. That little bitch was 16 years old, 4 years older than me, and she didn't tell a soul we were out there. She left us. I still don't like her to this day because of that. It wasn't the first time she had done something like this to us, but I'll share more about that in another video. So I'm standing outside of the bathroom, in between the bathroom and the church. All this wind, rain, pine cones, straw, limbs, shit's blowing around everywhere. It's like a constant tornado. My hair was like just all over the damn place. I couldn't see anything. And then all of a sudden, everything stopped. The wind, the rain, the thunder, stuff blowing around, my hair, it all just stopped. It was calm. We had no idea the storm had made landfall and the eye was directly over us, so I'm standing outside at night in the eye of the storm alone. My ears start popping and the air cools down. It feels like a nice fall day. It feels good, and I get this nostalgic feeling like my favorite song just came on the radio. It felt so good, but then all of a sudden the mood broke and something told me, you better get the hell out of here now, hurry. But I was scared and I didn't want to leave them behind. So she's trying to pull the door back open. I'm trying to push the door open and my hair is soaking wet. And I turn around, I slick my hair back like this, and that was when I seen it. This very tall, dark figure was standing in between the dogwood tree and the church, just a few feet away from me. At first, I thought it was an adult who was coming out of the church to see what was taking us so long. So I start yelling, come on, we need help. Come help us open the door. But they didn't move. So I stopped snatching on the door altogether, and I pulled my hair back again. And I'm like, why is he standing there like that? What is wrong with him? No lie, what happened next still gives me nightmares. So she's in the bathroom screaming, open the door, open the door. So I face the door and start pushing on it, and when I turn around to see where this thing is, it flies up in my face and just sits there for a couple of seconds. Imagine a tall floating shadow with black holes for eyes. That's the only way I can describe it. This thing had the blackest eyes I ever seen. Just black, dark, soulless holes for eyes. I was so scared I could feel and hear my heart beating in my ears. My whole face was hot. Next thing I knew, it was gone. I don't know if it flew away, disappeared, or what. It was just gone. And then all of a sudden, this tall, skinny pine tree falls falls, bam, and hits the ground behind the bathroom. So I take off running back to the church. I beat on that church door so hard, like, let me in, there's something out here, and they're stuck in the bathroom, help. And then all the men ran out, got them out the bathroom. All the other kids are screaming and crying for their mamas, and their parents are wiping them off and changing their clothes, like, are you okay? And I'm just standing there in shock, not moving. My mama walks up and asks, what happened out there? But I don't say anything. The relative that took us out to the bathroom tells my mom she's probably a little shook up because while we were in there, she got locked outside in the storm and a tree fell right beside her. My mama sat me down and was drying my hair and changing my shirt, and I'm still just not talking, not moving. I can't believe what I just saw. Mama said, talk to me, are you okay? What happened out there? I said, I don't know. I saw something and it just weren't right. She said, what do you mean? We were all in here. I said, I don't know, but there was somebody out there. We were face to face before the tree fell. She said, what did it look like? I said, a tall shadow with black headlights for eyes. They were just big giant holes for eyes. She said, with the way that wind was blowing, it was probably a trash bag or some type of clothing blown around in the wind and you thought it was something else. I said, okay, but it stood there before it flew up in my face. Can trash bags stand up? She said, no. I was like, Mama, it's still out there. The monster, it's watching us. It's going to get us. And she said, no, it's not. It's not going to get you. Whatever it is gone. It's out there. It's not going to bother us. She said, I know you see things that everybody else don't always see, but you know they don't react well to it, so let's not talk about it. My mom believed in the supernatural, but I think because there were so many people around, she didn't want them to see me freaking out, and they start freaking out too, so she was trying to calm me down. Then I see the 16-year-old and yell, and you left us out there, and she says, I didn't know y'all were locked out there, lying her ass off as usual. The men who went outside come back in and said, look, the eye of the storm just went over, the second half of the storm is hitting, y'all get ready, it's gonna be bad. Mom starts laughing and says, wow, girl, you experienced something a lot of people will never experience in their entire lifetime. You stood in the eye of a major hurricane alone at night. I know she was just trying to break the mood, but I could tell she was freaked out by me almost being hit by a tree. I'm sitting there playing with my Gigapet, hands still shaking, listening to the wind when my grandma comes over and sits down with me. So I told grandma I thought I saw a demon, and I explained it to her, and she said, no, I think you saw the gray man. I asked who is the gray man, and she said it's a shadowy figure who appears before or during a storm. She said, I bet he was trying to warn you about that tree fall, and I said, well, he's got a funny way of warning people. It scared the hell out of me. Grandma said she saw the gray man years ago when Hurricane Hazel hit. Hurricane Hazel was one of the most catastrophic hurricanes to ever hit the Carolinas in the early 50s. It was devastating. Now grandma's starting to freak out, thinking I saw the gray man and he was trying to warn us that the second half of this storm was going to be a lot worse and we were going to lose our homes. I said, Grandma, I don't think that was the gray man. It didn't look right. I think that was a demon. By now, Hurricane Fran has made direct landfall over us as a Category 3 and she is rocking and rolling, tearing this place apart. Into the next morning, it's still going and this little church is hanging on by a thread and we are terrified it's going to fall apart or blow away any minute. So we all huddle up and hold the fort down until Hurricane Fran finally leaves. We walk outside to find that there are power lines and big trees knocked down, houses torn up, roofs blown off. It was bad. So everyone leaves the church and we start making our way back home, and that's where we find our trailer's completely intact. One piece of paneling blew off the side of our trailer. That was it. Our little trailer was perfectly fine. Now, even though the storm has moved on and is weakening, it is still a very powerful storm doing a lot of damage to other places. Hurricane Fran killed 27 people and costed millions of dollars in damages. So 11-year-old me writes a report about this hurricane and how I saw a demon outside the church, and I turned it into my teacher. And y'all, for the first time ever, I got an A and a question mark side by side on that report. I can't imagine what she was thinking. But I knew what I saw. I never lied about it before, and I wasn't going to start now. I've lived in North and South Carolina all my life, so I've been through a lot of hurricanes, and I've seen some weird stuff during these storms. I think there's something about the weather that messes with the veil between the living and the dead and allows us to communicate or at least interact with one another, especially during more powerful storms.
Okay, listen to this glitch in the Matrix that we all wish would happen to us. So this woman says that one of her two sons, he's 20 months old, came running to her screaming, and his hand was covered in blood. I don't want to hear it about spelling it out. I don't feel like getting banned on here. Anyway, she quickly realizes that he had cut himself between his pointer and middle finger. She said it was fairly deep looking, and she even called her husband over to assist because she gets a little bit queasy around blood. She even asked her husband if they could possibly put a stitch in there due to the size and depth of the wound. So as they're assessing it, the husband goes ahead and takes the child into the bathroom to rinse his hand off so they can get a better idea of what they're dealing with. Okay, listen to this. So she says to both of their surprises, after they had completely rinsed off his hand, the cut was completely gone. She makes a note that this child's pajamas were covered in red from this cut, but now nothing. They're kind of freaking out. They're checking all of his other fingers on both hands, in between, everywhere, for like 5 minutes straight in disbelief. And end result was that not so much as a paper cut was even found. I mean, this thing was gaping, blood everywhere, and now absolutely nothing. She said they have no idea what to make of this. I mean, they even had like the Neosporin and gauze out, ready to bandage this thing up, and they just didn't need it anymore. The oldest son even came in and suggested that he might have cut it while
playing on a specific toy because he was there and saw it all happen. He's like, I mean, I'm really happy that he wasn't hurt, but like he was though. And she's just baffled. She can't make sense of it. This actually reminds me of another story that I told in the Glitch in the Matrix playlist. It was one that happened to me about a soccer ball. And I'll let you go ahead and dig that one up. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are about this story in the comments. And if you haven't already, definitely follow for more creepy story time.
Let's read another scary Reddit story. My name is Michael, and I'm a 14-year-old boy who lives with my aunt in the countryside. Now out here, we have no neighbors. The closest place to my house is about 8 miles away. I always loved living out here because I've always liked the seclusion, and the road we live by is always dead at night, which makes for good sleep. Now my aunt is always working the night shift, so this means I would be home alone pretty much every night. Long story short, I came home from school on a relatively crappy day, thunderstorms and rain all day and all night, and spent my day playing video games and Snapchatting my friends. At about 9 o'clock, my aunt came upstairs and told me she was heading off to her job. I was always fine with this because I liked being home alone. I had full range of the house and could play loud music all I wanted. Who wouldn't love it? At about 11 o'clock, I had started feeling tired and laid down to watch some YouTube and go to sleep. And soon enough, I did. I woke up at some odd hour of the night to somebody knocking on the door. I sat up and muttered, "What the hell?" I thought my aunt had got home from the night shift and reluctantly went to go answer the door, and out of habit, I checked the window beside the door to make sure it was her, but there was nobody there. I thought to myself, probably some stupid kids knocking on my door and running away, and I dismissed it at that and went back to my room. I checked my phone to realize it was 3 a.m., and the thought of teenagers ding-dong ditching my home was suddenly out of the question given that it was a Wednesday, and I basically lived in the middle of nowhere. Just as I was thinking, I heard a bang coming from the basement. I jumped and tried to make up an excuse, like a noise of the thunderstorm, to calm me down. We always kept our basement door locked anyway, out of my aunt's paranoia and fear of someone breaking in. That's when I heard footsteps slowly creaking up the old wooden stairs in my basement. Frozen with fear, I grabbed my phone and called 911. The operator told me to go to an upstairs room in the house and grab a weapon to defend myself. But there was no way I was going to grab a knife from the kitchen, especially when I heard the door being slammed and quickly realized that someone was trying to bust it down. I jumped from my bed and closed my door quietly and hid in my closet like the 911 operator had told me to do. This was easily the scariest moment of my life, but suddenly, the banging stopped. But what comes next will haunt me for my whole life. Whoever it was screamed at the top of their lungs, but it wasn't a normal scream. It was an insane and disgruntled scream. And then I heard the basement door collapse. Now he was full out screaming as he sprinted up the stairs. He went through all the rooms down the upstairs hallway, still screaming, until he reached mine. My door, unfortunately, didn't have a lock on it, and when I heard him open my door, I was paralyzed with fear. I could see him through the shades of my closet. He was still screaming, looking all over my room, even under my bed. But then, after trying to hold my breath for too long, I let out a puff of air. He perked up, looked straight at my closet, and slowly started walking towards it, no longer screaming. I couldn't even breathe at the moment, especially when he just stopped right in front of the closet door. I could see him through the closet, and he had the biggest smile I had ever seen. As soon as he slowly reached for the closet doorknob, there was a loud bang at the door and somebody yelling, "Police!" The man quickly ran and tried to run out my window but failed. As soon as I saw the police tackle him, I instantly ran out of the closet and outside. After a couple of minutes, I saw the police bring the man out in cuffs, but on the way to the car, he stared at me with the biggest smile and the craziest eyes I had ever seen. Watching him ride away with the police was the greatest moment of my life. But what still haunts me today is the face he made as he was standing in front of my closet door, ready to do something horrible. Okay, if you've been following me for a while, you know that is my worst fear. Like a home invasion, especially while being home alone. And the fact that this guy was running around screaming, that reminds me of like a zombie or something. That is terrifying.
I need to tell you this ghost story. One day, I was about 14 to 16 years old. I was watching the family dog, and I kept hearing creaks around the house. I kept quiet and listened closely, and I swear I heard footsteps, which was weird because no one was home at the time. I woke up our dog to see if she would react to the sounds. She seemed very unsure, almost uneasy, and I started to freak out and called my best friend. "I'm really scared," I said. "I think someone is in the house." I called her instead of calling 911 because the activity in the home wasn't unusual. My best friend was babysitting at the time, but she said she could come over if she brought her younger sister as well. She came over to the house with her younger sister, and we both grabbed weapons and went to the basement. We worked our way from the bottom to the top, clearing each room. As we neared the second floor, I could hear the footsteps again, but quietly. I started to feel really uncomfortable and even ill. We started to walk towards my bedroom, my brother's bedroom, and our washroom. Each door and room were side by side. As my best friend walks out of my parents' room, my door, my brother's door, and the washroom door slammed shut. We opened the washroom door, and there was nothing. We opened the door to my room, and again, nothing. Nothing in my brother's room either. No one. We attempted to check the attic from the door in my brother's room, but it would not open. Eventually, we gave up, calmed down, and my best friend and her sister had to leave. About a year later, I was on Skype, and I felt an uneasy feeling like someone was watching me. "I think I can hear someone," I say, "but everyone is asleep." I looked over at my two dogs. One looked extremely scared, and the other was hidden behind him. I tried to get both dogs to come out of the room, but they refused. Eventually, they left my room and headed towards my mom's room. And that's when I heard stomping and running up the stairs, extremely fast. I slammed my door closed and locked it. I'm on the other side of the door, listening closely. The stomps stopped at the top of the stairs, but now there were slow, quiet footsteps, and they were coming for my room. The footsteps stopped on the other side of my door. It felt like 20 minutes, but it was probably 2. I could hear a foot step back away from my door, but I refused to check what was there and decided that I just needed to go to bed and deal with it in the morning. The next morning, my mother mentioned that it sounded like someone was in the house last night. I even felt someone sit on the bed, and when I looked, no one was there, she had said. Hours later, I decided to look around the house and see if anything had moved. I even checked my parents' room and my brother's room. I went into my brother's room with my heart beating out of my chest. I looked around and everything seemed fine. Nothing had moved. I decided to check the closet. Everything seemed to be fine and normal until I looked up. The door in my brother's room that led to the attic was gone. Everyone in the home, me, my brother, my mom, we all remember the door being there, and it all of a sudden disappeared. Biggest reason I know there was a door in that room was because when we moved in, I got to choose my bedroom, and I specifically avoided my brother's room because of the door to the attic, the door that has now gone missing. Something in this home is seriously wrong.
Imagine one day you go to a hotel, okay? It doesn't matter for whatever the reason you went to a hotel. So you get your keys, and when you open your door, you see this. Bro, what the hell is this? Let me explain. It all started in 1935 in Kansas City in this hotel right here called the President Hotel. It's like a very known big ass hotel in Kansas City. It looks small here because the picture is cropped. Anyways, one day somebody checked into this hotel, okay? So they got a new customer. The customer's name was Ronald T. Owen, okay? And when Ronald entered, he went to the reception. He was like, "Yeah, bro, give me a key. I want to get a room." The receptionist was like, "Okay, cool." The receptionist gave him his key and he told him that he got the room number 1046. Ronald was like, "Okay, thank you, we're gone." So after a while, and I mean like a big while, a maid wanted to check on his room, okay? A maid who basically works here wanted to check on the room 1046 where Roland is supposed to be. So she was like, "Hello? Is anyone here? Roland heard the knocking on the door. The gentleman that he is, he immediately got up and opened it. It was the maid. The maid was like, hey, can I clean here? He was like, yeah, okay, do your stuff. And when the maid finished cleaning and wanted to leave, Roland told her to not close the door because he's expecting somebody. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where you need to focus because this is where everything becomes creepy. The next day, the maid came back to the same room to clean again. So she knocked, nobody's here. Knocked again, nobody's here. She was like, okay, is this thing closed? She tried to open, it was closed. So she was like, okay, Mr. Roland is probably not here, so I will just use my key, clean his room, and then go. Yeah, let's do this. She opened the door. This is what she saw. She saw Roland sitting in the dark alone. When she saw him, she was like, bro, what the hell is wrong with him? So she decided to come closer to him, and this is where she noticed that he was terrified. She noticed that she didn't want to disturb him, okay? She was like, he doesn't look in a good mood. I will not disturb him, I'll just go. Later that afternoon, she decided to come back, but this time she learned her lesson. She didn't enter directly, she just knocked. So when she knocked this time, somebody actually responded. The only problem is, it was not Roland, okay? It was a deep voice, and he told her to go away. When the maid heard that voice, obviously she was terrified. She was like, I'll never come back again. You don't have to tell me that twice. I'm gone. The next day, exactly on January 4th, this is how they found Roland. I cannot tell you exactly how they found him because it's so messed up, the video will get taken down. What you need to know is the fact that he didn't have much time left, okay? So when the police came and they were like, bro, who did this to you? Roland refused to answer. He didn't directly refuse, he just lied, okay? And it was obvious. He told them that all of this was an accident because he fell on the bathtub. Bro, who would believe that? Obviously, somebody has been doing this to him, but he refused to tell. And it turned out later that even his name was fake. Apparently, his name was Artemis. Why? Well, the story from here becomes way too complicated, and I don't think I'm doing a part 2 because the man is already gone. So why?
You've lived in South London long enough, you'll know some buildings carry more than bricks and dust. They carry things that don't want to be remembered. This all happened in late 2022, just before Christmas. I was desperate for a place to live after a messy breakup. You know how it is. He kept the flat in Brixton, I got the sofa cushions and emotional trauma. With the market being what it is, the only place I could afford on short notice was this run-down bedsit in an old house on Annerley Hill. Victorian, creaky, freezing, but I didn't care. I needed quiet, solitude, somewhere to figure things out. The landlord, a tight-lipped guy named Morris, barely spoke during the tour, just handed me the keys to room 3B and muttered something like, don't go poking around at night. These walls remember things. Thought he was just trying to be spooky or was drunk. Either way, I didn't press. The first week was uneventful. Cold as hell, and I could hear rats in the walls. It was the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder, dangerous when you're already not sleeping. But then came the first incident. Day 8, 2:43 a.m. I woke up gasping, as if someone had pressed a hand against my mouth in my sleep. My ears were ringing, and the room was icy cold, despite the electric heater on full blast, and then I saw it. The mirror across from my bed had fogged up from the inside. I hadn't showered, I hadn't boiled a kettle, the air was dry, but right in the center of the mirror was a smear, like a palm had pressed against it. 5 long, thin finger marks dragged downwards.
Like in Titanic.
It's Kate Winslet. I sat there, heart punching my ribs, whispering to myself, you're overtired, it's nothing, it's condensation, just weird condensation. But the marks were on the inside of the glass. I tapped it. It was solid and freezing cold. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Day 10, 3:17 a.m. Started hearing voices. Faint, like they were being spoken underwater, always between 3 and 4 a.m. Always just low enough that I couldn't make out the words. I tried recording the sound. I played it back. Nothing. Just silence. But I knew what I heard. I even tried putting a glass to the wall to listen better. Sometimes I'd hear crying. Other nights it sounded like whispering in another language, one that made my skin crawl just listening to it. By day 12, I'd stopped sleeping altogether. Day 14, the scratching. That night, I lay in bed trying not to breathe too loudly. The whispers had started earlier than usual, just after midnight, and now something new joined them. Scratching. Faint at first, then more intense, and it wasn't a rat, it had rhythm, deliberate. It was like something was inside the wall, clawing its way out. I sat up. Every hair on my body was standing. Then the scratching stopped. Silence. I turned towards the door, and I saw the handle start to turn. Slowly. Deliberately. I couldn't move, and I couldn't scream. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I was awake and frozen in place. The door creaked open an inch, then two. The hallway beyond was pitch black. There were no footsteps, no breathing, nothing. But something entered the room. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. The air pressure shifted. My ears popped. The stench of rotting meat filled the room. I could feel something watching me and standing right next to the bed. And that is when the mirror shattered. No warning, no sound before it, just crack like a gunshot. I screamed and finally moved. I turned on every light I could. I grabbed my coat and I bolted out of that flat barefoot. I didn't care. I ran all the way down Annerley Hill to the 24-hour Tesco. Barefoot in December, trembling, crying, people staring at me like I'd lost my mind. I stayed with a friend in Sydenham that night. When I returned the next day with her and a crowbar just in case, we found the door wide open. Inside, the room was freezing cold, like the windows had been open all night, but they hadn't. But the worst part? The mirror wasn't just shattered. It was gone, removed cleanly from the wall, frame and all, no glass on the floor, nothing left behind but 5 long scratches carved into the plaster where it had once hung, like someone or something had stepped through it. I moved out immediately. Didn't argue with the landlord, didn't even ask for my deposit back. Morris just looked at me and said, Room 3B always finds a way. I still live in South London, but I avoid Annerley like the plague. Even now, years later, sometimes around 3 a.m, I swear, I can hear scratching in the walls of wherever I am, and sometimes, when I look in the mirror just before bed, I see 2 reflections.
Oh, that's horrible.
In southern Montana, there's a place called the Pryor Mountains. And this is home to the Crow Indians. And they speak of the little people who live in these mountains. Now, the little people are about knee-high in height. They have these sharp, jagged teeth, long nails, and these big, round-shaped heads. And it's said that their eyes resemble the moon. Now, sometimes, if you're respectful, they will help you. In other times, they will lead you to doom. Now, I heard 2 stories about the little people. The first one comes from the Crow Reservation. There was a woman who was outside one day hanging laundry with her 2 children. Now, her children started playing hide and go seek, but the mother said, hey, I want you to stay close by. Don't go too far. It's starting to get dark. But they didn't heed their mother's warning, and they go deep into the woods. Now, the sister, she is hiding, and the brother, he is seeking. All of a sudden, the sister sees these little shadows start to move through the woods, and she hears laughter. And this scares her, so she starts yelling for her brother, Jack, 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 and he doesn't respond. And she starts panicking, looking for him, and she cannot find him. So she runs as fast as she can, and she tells her mom. And her mom goes and tries to search for Jack. She cannot find him. And eventually this leads to a big, huge search with the whole community, and they cannot find young Jack. Now, the little girl, she is very bothered by this, and she goes to tell her mom that the little people took Jack, and they told him, come live with us, come stay with us, come follow us. And she keeps talking about these little people who took Jack. Eventually, several years pass, and she kind of forgets about Jack. Until one day, she's outside, and she hears, hey mama, hey mama. And here comes Jack running to her. Except Jack is the same age at when he disappeared and wearing the same exact clothes. The other story, a young man who decides he's going to go for a hike up in the mountains. And so he drives his truck up to the spot and he parks and he starts following this trail. As he's walking along this trail, he hears a baby crying. And as he continues to walk on, he hears this get louder and louder and louder. And that's when he realizes, I must have made the little people angry. So he gets in his backpack and he pulls out some tobacco and some oranges and he sets it down as an offering. And he says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to come here to your home and disrespect it. I'm going to leave now. And so he gets back to his truck as fast as he can And as he's driving out down the mountains, in the middle of the road, he sees something and he stops. It's two deer's legs crossed in an X. And that's when he knows he messed up and he shouldn't have been there. And he should not go back. What do you think? Do you believe in the little people?
The Sloss furnaces in Birmingham, Alabama are some of the creepiest places I've ever heard about. Colonel James Sloss was one of the founders of Birmingham, and in 1980 he decided to build some huge furnaces so that they could build a train track near the city. But then in 1886, the Sloss furnaces were sold to another investor who furthered the project even more. And in 1927, the second set of furnaces were built. They also built houses around the furnaces so that people who worked there or were desperate to get a job there had a place to live while they worked. But by the time the 1950s and 1960s arrived, public health became a huge concern, and they realized that these were producing a massive amount of pollution. In 1971, the furnaces were shut down for good, and that's when they were given over to the state. Now, currently, I believe currently anyway, that there is a museum in there, and they also do things like festivals, and there's other things that they use these for. But going back into the history of Sloss, working here was an absolute nightmare. Temperatures would get up to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And the people who worked here had to work here for 12 hours a day on a daily basis. To make matters worse, there was a night shift chief named James Scum Wormwood. This man was a terrible person. Under his command, 47 people lost their lives. And many more were injured so horribly that they couldn't even work anymore. There was a huge furnace on this facility that was much bigger than the rest, and they had named it Big Alice. Now, one day in October of 1906, when James Wormwood was on night patrol, he fell into this furnace. Now, this would have been horrific. He would have passed away falling into melted iron. But the thing was, is since James was not that well liked, many people thought that he had been pushed in and he didn't fall in. But the record shows that it was a tragic accident. But James wasn't the only one who passed away this way. There's at least 3 more people who fell into this liquid iron and passed away this way. There was another pretty horrific passing of a person. He went to go eat his lunch next to a rotating gear, and his clothes got caught into it, and I'll leave it at that. And to this day, people think that the Sloss furnaces are still haunted. Many people believe that the ghost of James still roams around making people work. Often people have heard someone saying, "Go back to work," when there's nobody there. But the scariest story is that of Samuel Blumenthal. He was making his rounds one night, and the furnaces were already off, and he said he came to face with a monster. While he was passing away, he said that this monster was half human, half demon. He also said that the demon tried pushing him towards Big Alice, but he fought back further. He was found the next day. Again, the furnaces were off, but he had third-degree burns all over his body. Unfortunately, he passed away a few days later. But what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that the place is actually haunted, or is it all just a hoax? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and follow for more.
Weird spooky story time. And her son's girlfriend has been seeing a duende in her apartment here in Santa Cruz. My son's girlfriend just started staying with us for her winter break from college, and she's been reportedly seeing weird paranormal things around our new apartment here at... My son and his girlfriend have been sleeping in the living room and have been seeing things and hearing things. I've heard many ghost stories about apartments. These apartments used to have a lot of gang violence, and many unalivings happened here years ago. They have been on the local news for years because of fires and unalivings. I personally haven't seen or heard anything, but there have been countless times where situations felt strange and unusual, and I don't have any logical proof behind it. My cat has been acting different lately too, and I feel like animals have more connection to spirits or whatever might be haunting my home. My daughter-in-law has also shared stories about seeing a little beady-eyed figure with a scarf on top of the fridge. I've heard things from my fridge myself, but I always brushed it off, thinking it was a rat or something else. I don't know, maybe it's something, maybe it's not. But it would be nice to have some answers. The fact that your cat has been acting strange is already a sign, because
Animals can get like agitated or irritated because duendes will mess with them. Also, the little beady eyes and the scarf, like, if that doesn't scream duende, I don't know what does. Has anyone else had an encounter with duendes in the Santa Cruz area? Let me know in the comments or DM me your story.
He was a college student who visited North Korea and came back in a coma with brain damage. I don't even think I have the words to explain how terrifying this story is, so we're just gonna get straight into it. Otto Warmbier was from a small suburb near Cincinnati, Ohio. He was one of 3 children to his parents, Fred and Cindy. He was raised in a 2-story home and has very often been described to be just an all-American boy. He attended a top-ranked high school in Ohio and graduated as the 2nd highest ranking student in his grade. But not only did he exceed academically, he was also a very gifted athlete. He was a swimmer and a soccer player, and a coach of his has said that he was just kind of a natural leader. On top of that, he was also prom king, so a pretty great guy all around. He had a lot going for him. After high school, he attended the University of Virginia with a scholarship, and he was the kind of guy that had his future planned out. He knew what he wanted for himself, he knew what he wanted out of life, and he was going to do whatever he needed to do to make it happen, all while still making his friends and his family a big priority of his. He was a pretty organized person by the sounds of it. He had a big calendar hung up in his dorm room, and on there he had everything from birthdays to assignments to sporting games to make sure that he never forgot anything. Otto's dream was working in investment banking, and by the fall of his junior year, he had landed himself an internship with a finance company, and he was very eager to get to work. That being said, before graduating uni, he wanted to take every and any opportunity that he had to travel because he had always been curious about other places, other cultures, and he loved seeing different parts of the world. Otto was supposed to take part in a study abroad program in Hong Kong in early 2016, and he thought to himself, hey, I'm already going to be abroad, why don't I make a pit stop to North Korea while I'm there? His dad said that Otto had always been curious about their culture and had always wanted to meet the people of North Korea. So that's what he decided to do. 21-year-old Otto booked a tour of North Korea with Young Pioneer Tours. They were a China-based company, and their whole slogan was, quote, budget travel to destinations your mother would rather you stayed away from, end quote. It would be a 5-day, 4-night trip with a group, and with them at all times, they would have state-sponsored tour guides. So Otto put down the deposit for $1,200, and then he got ready to meet up with the tour group at the Beijing airport. Then they all flew together to North Korea's capital. Out of their group, there was only 2 people who had traveled alone, obviously Otto, and then there was a man called Danny Grattan. Danny was from the UK, and he became Otto's roommate for the 5-day trip. Regarding Otto, he said, quote, from the second I met him, we hit it off. He was very bright, intelligent, and likable. The hotel they were staying at in North Korea, I've seen, has often been referred to as the Alcatraz of fun, and if you didn't know, Alcatraz was famous for being America's most notorious maximum security federal prison. But the hotel in North Korea, I guess, had that nickname because the hotel itself was pretty isolated. It's on an island, but within the building there are restaurants, bowling alleys, spas, casinos. So if you're visiting and you're staying there, you are isolated, but you can find plenty different entertainment places to keep yourself occupied. Also, obviously, you can leave the hotel. Anyway, that's where they were going to be staying, Otto rooming with his new friend Danny. Early on in the trip, there were definitely some things that made Otto feel cautious, or just little things that made him pause for a second. For example, they went on a tour to tour a ship. The ship was an American Navy ship that had been captured by North Korea in the 1960s. And while touring it, the North Korean tour guide was talking about how they were able to capture the ship from, quote unquote, the imperial enemy, aka referring to America as the imperial enemy. The 82 American people that were captured with the ship were held and starved for 11 months by North Korea. Otto also saw billboards around that made it clear that North Korea did not like America. North Korea saw America as their #1 enemy. Things like that definitely made Otto think, whoa, I am visiting enemy territory. But he always found a way to laugh it off and eventually just go back to actually enjoying the tour. December 31st obviously was New Year's Eve 2015 going into 2016. To celebrate, the group went out, had fun, saw fireworks, and eventually they all made it back to the hotel. Danny Grattan went bowling, and a couple hours went by before he realized that he had not seen Otto. But by the time Danny made it back to their room around 4:30 in the morning, Otto was just in bed. He was sleeping. On January 2nd of 2016, it was time for them to leave North Korea, so Danny and Otto headed off to the airport. After that, remember, Otto was supposed to go to Hong Kong for the study abroad program, and then he had plans to go to Singapore before returning back to the States. But Otto did not make his flight out of North Korea. At the airport, Danny and Otto were the last 2 people to go through passport control. They walked up to the little desk, showed their passports side by side, but the officers were really taking their time looking at them. They were in no rush, when suddenly 2 soldiers walked up to them. One of them tapped Otto on the shoulder, and the 2 of them then escorted Otto away. Danny made a joke when Otto was being ushered away through a wooden door, saying, well, that's the last we'll ever see of you, and Otto nervously laughed before being taken away. That was the last time anyone outside of North Korean custody would ever see Otto Warmbier alive and well. Otto was taken because he was being accused of stealing a poster from a staff-only area of the second-floor hotel they were staying in. North Korean authorities accused him of sneaking into that hallway just before 2 in the morning on January 1st and stealing that poster that had either the name or the image of a North Korean leader on it. They were saying that he stole it because he was encouraged to do so by a Methodist church in Ohio in America. North Korea saying that the American administration told Otto to steal the poster to, quote, harm the work ethic and motivation of the Korean people and bring home a trophy. Which that really made no sense at all because Otto was Jewish, aka not involved with the Methodist church at all. Regardless, stealing items with either the name or the image of a North Korean leader is considered a very serious crime by the North Korean government. North Korea would later release CCTV footage, very grainy footage in black and white from January 1st at 1:57 in the morning, where a shadowy figure in that hallway can be seen removing the poster from the wall and placing it onto the floor. North Korean authorities were claiming that this was Otto. But to say that that person in the video is Otto, to me, is pushing it, because the video is such poor quality to the point where it seems impossible, to me at least, to be able to identify the person in the footage. You can't even really see what the poster looked like at all, really. After his arrest at the airport, Otto completely disappeared from public view. Nobody knew if he was alive or dead. His family got in contact with US government officials who had experience in freeing several Americans who had been imprisoned by North Korea, but they were finding it impossible to find information about where he was and if he was okay. I don't know how true this is, but the tour guide company also stated that they were trying to get a hold of anyone that may know what happened to Otto or try to get in contact with him or anyone that knew where he was, but all they were told was that he was fine. It wasn't until 3 weeks later, 123, that North Korea announced that they were holding Otto for committing a, quote, hostile act against the state. And then in late February, North Korean state news agency released a video of Otto. It is so sad and so scary to watch. In the video, he walks into what looks like a press room almost, and he is completely distraught. He's crying, he looks scared, but he confesses. He looks to be reading from a piece of paper, and he breaks down crying, saying, quote, I never should have allowed myself to be lured by the United States administration to commit a crime in this country. I wish that the United States administration never manipulate people like myself in the future to commit crimes against foreign countries. I entirely beg you, people and government of the DPR Korea, for your forgiveness. Please, I made the worst mistake of my life. He begged for forgiveness so many times and also begged to be allowed to return home, saying, quote, please, I've made the worst mistake of my life, but please act to save me. Please think of my family, end quote. A lot of people believe that he didn't confess because he actually did it. He only confessed because he was forced to and terrified of never being able to return back to America. The following month, in March, so he was detained January 2nd. He's been held by North Korea for a while now, but in March, he faced trial for stealing the poster. His trial lasted 1 hour, and 21-year-old Otto was sentenced to 15 years of hard labor in a North Korean prison. This entire time, while this whole thing was going on, of course, Otto's family behind the scenes were doing everything in their power to try and get Otto back home. They were not giving up hope. A year and a half passed from the last time that Otto's family saw him to when they would see him again. Finally, by June of 2017, North Korea agrees to release Otto. And the morning of his return, his parents, Fred and Cindy, were waiting for his plane to land back on American soil. They had not seen Otto since that confession footage was released in February of 2016, and they hadn't spoken to him for even longer. They were feeling extremely anxious. They were waiting in agony, all while feeling hopeful and counting down the seconds in which they would get to hug their son again. They had just before, earlier in the month, I actually think it was the week before based on the reports that I read, but Otto's parents had been made aware that there was something wrong with Otto. They were told something that made it sound like Otto was unconscious, but they really had no idea the state in which he was in. All they knew really was that he wasn't well, but that he was set to arrive back in the States January 13th. So they waited for the plane to land, and when it did, the stairs came down and Fred, Otto's dad, began walking up and into the plane. When he did, he heard what he described to be, quote, inhuman howling, and then he walked into the plane and realized that that sound was coming from his son. Otto was strapped in a stretcher and his parents did not even recognize him. He was not the same Otto. He was severely brain damaged. He had a shaved head. He was unable to speak. He was unable to see and unable to react to verbal commands. He had a feeding tube, and according to his parents, quote, it looked like someone had taken a pair of pliers and rearranged his bottom teeth, end quote. They also said that his arms and legs were totally deformed. Otto's dad went to hug him and to tell him how much they've missed him this entire time, but it was like Otto wasn't even in there anymore. At the sight of him, Otto's sister and mom ran out of the plane screaming, crying, because they were not prepared to see what they saw. Quote, we thought he was in a coma, but you couldn't call it a coma. What we pictured was that Otto would be asleep and maybe in a medically induced coma. And then when our doctors here would work with him, that he would get the best care and love, and then he would come out of it, end quote. but it did not take long for his family to realize that there would be no saving Otto. He was carried out of the plane by paramedics and taken to the University of Cincinnati's medical center. 6 days later, on June 19th of 2017, Otto passed away. This was his family statement, quote, "It is our sad duty to report that our son, Otto Warmbier, has completed his journey home. Surrounded by his loving family, Otto died today at 2:20 p.m. It would be easy at a moment like this to focus on all that we lost, future time that won't be spent with a warm, engaging, brilliant young man whose curiosity and enthusiasm for life knew no bounds. But we choose to focus on the time we were given to be with this remarkable person. You can tell from the outpouring of emotion from the communities that he touched, Wyoming, Ohio, and the University of Virginia, to name just two, that the love for Otto went well beyond his immediate family. We would like to thank the wonderful professionals at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center who did everything that they could for Otto. Unfortunately, the awful, torturous mistreatment our son received at the hands of the North Koreans ensured that no other outcome was possible beyond the sad one that we experienced today. When Otto returned to Cincinnati late on January 13th, he was unable to speak, unable to see, and unable to react to verbal commands. He looked very uncomfortable, almost anguished. Although we would never hear his voice again, within a day the countenance of his face changed. He was at peace, he was home, and we believe that he could sense that. We thank everyone around the world who has kept him and our family in their thoughts and prayers. We are at peace and at home too. Everyone had questions about what really happened to Otto. The medical examiner in Cincinnati was able to get some medical records from the North Koreans, and they said that the records showed that Otto had been in the same condition since April of 2016, shortly after his sentencing. So that would mean that for at least 14 months, Otto had been in this coma-like state after apparently suffering a severe neurological injury from an unknown cause. 14 months went by before North Korea disclosed his condition to his family and to US officials. His parents had been kept completely in the dark about their son's true condition for well over a year. They had no idea. But after the fact, North Korea officials were claiming that shortly after his sentencing in 2016, Otto had fallen ill and had fallen into a coma after taking a sleeping pill. US doctors stated that after some testing, they discovered Otto showed extensive loss of brain tissue in all regions of the brain, but they could not provide a specific cause as to why that would have happened. Daniel Cantor was the neurologist who was the lead physician for Otto when he returned back to the States, and he stated that Otto passed away because of severe brain damage resulting from being deprived of oxygen. In other words, he was not getting the amount of oxygen that he needed, causing very little blood flow to have access to his brain. He was able to tell that he had been deprived of oxygen for about 5 to 20 minutes, but the actual cause as to why he wasn't receiving the oxygen that he needed is unknown. His manner of death was listed as undetermined. Fred, Otto's father, strongly believes that Otto's death was no accident and that he lost his life as a result of the treatment that he endured at the hands of the North Korean officials. And a lot of people from the public agree with this. But to this day, there is no way for sure to say what really happened to Otto. In July of 2017, the US government banned American citizens from traveling to North Korea, with Otto's case cited as a major reason as to why. To this day, Otto's parents continue to speak publicly, advocate for human rights, and work to ensure Otto's death brings about meaningful change in how the world deals with North Korea, and they remain active trying to hold North Korea accountable through legal means for what happened to their son. And I want to end this video with a quote from Otto's friends describing him, quote, "A sports fan who can reel off stats about seemingly any team, a friendly Midwestern who can break down underground rap lyrics and craft some of his own, a deep thinker who would challenge himself and others to question their place in the world, a guy from an entrepreneurial family who ate half-price sushi, an insatiably curious person with a strong work ethic, and a delight in the ridiculous." This probably would be the case that makes me lose sleep. I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard of this case, and I want to know what your thoughts are on it, because literally, what do you mean? That is all I have for this video. Thank you for spending time with me today and for listening to Otto's story. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
There's a particular set of rules that they say to follow if you ever encounter the paranormal. Like, for instance, if someone knocks on your door after midnight, you do not answer it. If the phone rings after midnight, you're not supposed to answer it. If something calls your name, it's said that if you respond, it could possess you. If you go to a funeral, and when you're leaving, you should never look back until you get home. If you were in a cemetery, and you should never step on the gravestones or in front of them. Also, if you're at a cemetery, when you drive past the cemetery gates, you should hold your breath. And when you leave a cemetery, always check your back seat. Now, when you're at home, you should never have a mirror facing the back. And you should never have two mirrors facing each other. It's also said that you should never, ever name a spirit in your home. You should never try and communicate with it, and you should never acknowledge it. So what do you think? What rules have you heard to protect yourself or keep yourself safe from the paranormal?
You can't make this stuff up. Might have known the story of real life boogeyman.
This guy goes caving and accidentally crawls headfirst into the wrong tunnel, and to this day his body is still stuck there. So his name is John Jones. He's 26 years old, living in Utah with his wife Emily and their 13-month-old daughter Lizzie. And Emily's 4 months pregnant with their second kid, so like this guy has his whole life ahead of him. And one random night in November of 2009, John gets this invite from his brother Josh to go caving at the Nutty Putty cave with a whole group of family and friends. And even though John hasn't been caving in years because he's been so busy with medical school and being a new dad, something about this just sounds so good. Like maybe he's been missing the thrill of it, or maybe he just needs a break from all of this stress. I don't know, but he says yes. And so at around 8 p.m. on November 24th, John pulls up to this dirt parking lot in the middle of absolutely nowhere to meet up with Josh and the rest of the group. And one by one, they all start climbing down the entrance of the Nutty Putty cave. And the second they get inside, the temperature just drops. Like it goes from this dry winter cold to this wet, vicious freeze that sinks into your bones like ice water and makes your whole body ache. And pretty quickly, the group decide to split up. The kids and the less experienced cavers head off to this area called the Big Slide, which is basically this wide, safer passage where you can slide down on your butt like it's a natural water slide. It's safe, it's fun, and perfect for people who aren't trying to push their limits. But John and Josh, they were here to push their limits. They were here to find the birth canal. Now, John had done his research on this passage and he knew that it had a reputation. Like it's this legendary tight squeeze that every serious caver in Utah talks about. And people have actually gotten stuck in there before, multiple times actually, but every single time the rescuers would manage to pull them out and everyone would just go home perfectly fine. So it wasn't like some death trap or something. And John and Josh were both aware that it was going to be a little dangerous, but they were very confident that they'd be able to handle it. And honestly, if they pulled it off, they would have bragging rights forever. So to them, it was worth the risk. Now, me personally, I'll pass. There is no way that you're going to get me to crawl into a hole that tight, but that's just me. Anyways, they start crawling deeper into the cave, moving forward on their hands and knees. And at first, John's got plenty of room to move, but as he keeps crawling deeper and deeper, he started noticing that his shoulders were now scraping against both walls of the cave, and the ceiling was getting so low that he had to duck his head down and turn it sideways in this really uncomfortable position just to be able to keep squeezing through. But that's not even the worst part, because the walls of the cave were now pressing against his chest, and every time he tried to take a breath, he could feel the rock pushing back against his ribs, making it harder and harder to fully expand his lungs. Like imagine trying to breathe with someone sitting on your chest. That is what it felt like. But John just kept telling himself that this was normal. This is just what caving is like when you're going through these really challenging passages. And so he kept reminding himself that this is what he signed up for. And so he decided to keep on pushing forward inch by painful inch, pulling himself deeper and deeper into the cave. And eventually he reaches these two tiny openings that are right in front of him, and he stops there for a second, staring at them while trying to decide which entrance leads to the birth canal. And the one on the left looked to be about 18 inches wide and the most challenging, so he kind of just figured that this had to be the one, or at least he thought it was. So he yelled back to his brother Josh, who was somewhere in the passage right behind him, "Hey, I think this is it. I'm going in." And Josh just yelled back, "Okay, go for it." So John positions himself head first and he starts sliding down this incredibly small passage. And in his head, he's thinking, okay, I'm almost there, just a little bit further and this passage is going to open up. Except John keeps sliding and sliding, and he's starting to realize that something isn't quite right here. Like instead of going up like he should, the passage is actually getting even tighter, and he can feel the walls closing in around him more than before, which is the opposite of what's supposed to happen. But John just kind of figured that maybe he was getting a little bit paranoid. Like tight spaces mess with your head. They make you second guess everything. So he told himself that if he just kept pushing forward, he'd eventually see an opening any minute now. It just had to be ahead. And so he does one big push with his hands, really trying to propel himself through whatever tight spot he's wedged into. But that's when John realizes that he's got a serious problem. He literally cannot move at all. His hips have like caught onto something in the passage, and he can like feel this rock pressing hard into his hip bones from both sides, and he's unable to slide forward anymore, not even a single inch. So John immediately tries to push himself backward out of this thing, like, okay, this was a mistake, time to get out. So he plants both of his palms flat against the wet cave wall, and he pushes with every ounce of strength that he's got, but his arms won't fully extend because the walls are literally right there, just inches from his face, inches from his chest, and there's simply no room to build up any force. And despite all of his efforts, he's not moving anywhere. And so John, he starts panicking, and he screams back out to his brother, Josh, I think I'm stuck. And Josh immediately froze because the word stuck is not used lightly in a cave. Like, being stuck doesn't mean that you're uncomfortable. It means that you could die here. So Josh immediately starts working his way down, trying to see what's happening. And once he gets there, all he could see was John's feet sticking up, and the rest of his body was going straight down into this hole. It was almost as if his brother had been swallowed by earth. And so Josh quickly tries to grab onto his brother's legs to pull him out, but the hole was just too tight and too narrow. And after several minutes of trying to pull him out, they both knew how bad this was. So at some point, Josh quickly crawled right back out and called 911. And about 4 hours later, 4 hours of Josh just hanging there upside down in this darkness, cave rescuers finally arrive, and they crawl into the cave to find John. And that's when they figured out that John's situation was way worse than they could have imagined, because John wasn't stuck in some birth canal like they all thought. He had accidentally went inside the wrong entrance. The passage he was in was near Ed's Push, and this part of the cave is the most dangerous because it's only 18 inches wide and 10 inches high. Like, yes, please think about that. 10 inches high. That's basically the width of a piece of paper. That is how compressed his body was. So these cave rescuers, they quickly bring in this whole harness with a pulley system to try to hopefully pull John out, and they spend hours setting this thing up. Like, they're drilling into the limestone, they're hammering anchors into the cave wall, threading rope through tight passages, doing everything that they possibly can. And eventually, they actually get the harness attached around John's legs, and they start pulling, and oh my god, John's body actually starts to move. Like, by now, he has been completely stuck in the same position for 16 hours. And for the first time ever, his body is actually shifting upward. And the rescuers are like, yes, oh my god, yes, keep on pulling. You're gonna make it. You're gonna make it, John. Come on, you got it. And they even get to the point where they can see John's face for the first time. He's almost horizontal, almost out. But then, this loud sound echoes through the entire cave, and the anchor bolt they drilled into the cave, it just ripped right out of the rock, and the entire pulley system just collapses. And before anyone could even react, John's body slams all the way back down, deeper into the passage. They almost had him. Like, they were this close. He was right there. They could see his face, and now they're back to square one. Except worse than square one, because John's deeper into the cave, and the equipment failed, and everyone's exhausted, and they're all just losing hope. At some point, they actually set up a radio so that John can talk to his wife Emily, who had heard the news and immediately rushed over there. And John, who's barely even able to speak at this point, just tells her, I love you, Emily. Tell Lizzie that I love her, and I will get out. I will come see you again. Oh my gosh, like, he's trying so hard to stay positive, still trying to believe that he's going to make it home, but unfortunately, by now, it had already been 27 hours of him being stuck upside down. 27 hours of his heart working against gravity, trying to pump blood out of his brain. 27 hours of cold seeping into his bones. 27 hours of lungs that couldn't fully expand. And at 11:56 p.m. on November 25th, the night right before Thanksgiving, John fell unconscious and he died right there, 100 feet underground in a passage that was barely wider than his own shoulders. And his entire family, I mean, it was obvious they were devastated, absolutely destroyed. And they at first wanted rescuers to try again to at least save his body for a proper funeral, because that's what you do, right? You bring your loved ones home. But they quickly realized that there was just no way of doing it. Like, John's body had fallen so deep into Ed's Push that the rescuers themselves couldn't even crawl down there anymore. And even if they tried, it would put those rescuers at a serious risk. Like, they could die too just trying to retrieve a body. And so after days of discussion, they made a decision to seal the cave along with John inside permanently so that no one will ever get stuck inside there again.
So every single state has a serial killer, but what about the U.S. territories? Today I'm going to tell you guys about one of the worst serial killers from Washington, D.C. This is kind of like a bonus episode to the 50 States, 50 Serial Killers series that we are almost finished with. So I'm going to be telling you guys about the shopping cart killer. And this was pretty recent, like less than 5 years ago, which is really scary. And so I'm just going to get right into where the story starts. So on October 24th of 2021, again, not that long ago, a woman named Aline Elizabeth Redmond told her family she was going to a football game with a friend. She said that this friend's name was Anthony and she called him Ant as a nickname. Her daughter was like, okay, I've never met this guy before, but sounds like they're friends. And so it sounds like they didn't think that much of it. So she leaves to go to this football game with this guy that none of her family really knows. And then she never returns. And they didn't know what happened to her. And then unfortunately her remains were found outside of an undeveloped lot in Virginia. It was kind of near a motel called Howard Johnson Motel. And her hands were bound and her cause of death was disputed. One source has said like blunt force trauma, but I've also seen people say like asphyxiation. So I can't quite say what her cause of death was. But either way, there was a cord around her neck, there's a cord around her wrists. It's pretty clear she didn't do that to herself, and this was a homicide. Less than a month later, on November 19th, Tanita Smith, who was 39, also goes missing. Took a little bit to figure out exactly like where she was last known to be seen, and the police ended up, when they were investigating her disappearance, pinging her phone, and they found that the last location that they could get on her phone was at the Howard Johnson Hotel in Harrisonburg in Virginia, which is where Aline's body was found. So her body was found 15 feet away from where they found Aline. 15 feet. Like, this is not a coincidence. They're pretty sure whoever killed Aline killed Tanita. And Tanita's cause of death was also unclear. There's some debate as to what exactly killed her, but we do know that the same man killed both of these women. And then on September 30th, another woman who was only 29 years old, her name was Cheyenne Brown, she was last seen entering a Metro bus, and she was also a mom. She had a 7-year-old son at the time, and she was pregnant. And she just vanishes after being last seen getting on the bus. And her family was very committed, like all the families, to trying to find her. They went on TV, social media, everything to try to spread awareness about Cheyenne's disappearance. And Cheyenne's cousin actually told the police that 10 days before Cheyenne went missing, he saw a man named Anthony Robinson at her house, and the cousin actually had kicked Anthony out of the house. We don't really know the situation and why the cousin kicked him out. And so the fact that there's some sort of dispute with this random guy and then she goes missing, they're gonna think that this guy could be a suspect. And so they look into Anthony Robinson and they're kind of trying to figure out if he's connected in any way. End up tracing Cheyenne's steps to try to figure out like where she could have gone and if she disappeared. Again, she has a 7-year-old son. It's unlikely that she would just take off. And so they know she was staying at a hotel called the Moon Inn Hotel. And this is about 130 miles away from where the two other victims I previously mentioned were. And at the time, they had no connection. They did not know that these could have been connected. They didn't even know if Cheyenne had been murdered at this point. They see that she's staying at this hotel, and they learn that Anthony Robinson was seen at the bus stop that she was last seen at right before she goes missing. So that's suspicious. And then they learn that he was actually staying at the same hotel that she was staying at. So now they're like, he definitely is involved. There's no way that's a coincidence. So police are thinking that Anthony Robinson might be involved in Cheyenne's death. They're pretty sure that he probably killed her since they're in the same place. But as they are investigating Cheyenne's death, they're also investigating Aline's death, and they realize that Aline is showed arriving at the hotel in Howard Johnson Hotel, 130 miles away, and she goes to Anthony Robinson's room at 6 p.m. the day she would have been murdered, and at 4 a.m. the next morning, they see Anthony removing the body. She's wrapped in a bunch of hotel bed sheets and comforters. They see him using a shopping cart to wheel her body out of the hotel. They also found very similar footage of Tanita going and visiting his room, and then they found blood on the bed sheets of the room that she had shared with Anthony. And so they're like, oh, these are all connected. He not only killed Cheyenne, but he killed Aline and he killed Tanita. And so now they're connecting the pieces, but they still do not have Cheyenne's body. After they find this video evidence that he clearly was involved in at least 2 of the deaths, like they have concrete proof at this point, he's arrested on November 23rd of 2021. And at first when he's questioned, he's like, I never met these women. You guys are being crazy. Like, I would not do this. But after being shown the security footage and they're like, then explain this, he changes his story and he says that actually what happened is he was like connecting with them, and then he saw both of them coincidentally at different times take a white pill
his words, and then after that he fell asleep, he woke up, and he found that they had died of overdoses. No one's buying his story. He says that he only disposed of their bodies in fear that he would be suspected of murder. While they did find trace amounts of drug in the victims' bodies afterwards, it was not enough to be lethal. All of this does not add up. This story does not make sense. He's clearly lying. And after he was arrested, they actually end up finding Cheyenne Brown's body. Her body was actually found near the Moon Inn Hotel, and her body was found with a second body, and at the time they were so decomposed that they actually couldn't identify either of them. It wasn't until they saw a tattoo on Cheyenne's body that matched a photo that they had of Cheyenne's tattoos that they realized it was her. She and the other victim were found next to a shopping cart. Again, we had seen him using a shopping cart to get his victims out of the hotels previously, and so it kind of just solidified that he had killed Cheyenne. And now they're like, but we have a fourth unidentified victim. He has killed at least 4 people. He is a serial killer. It takes a while, but they are able to eventually ID the other woman. And her name was Stephanie Harrison. She was 48, and she was just visiting DC. That's why she was staying in the hotel. She actually was visiting from Redding, California at the time. It sounds like the theory is that she was not connected to Anthony in any way. They didn't know each other personally, but he probably picked her up at a hotel bar, and her remains, again, were found in the same container next to the shopping cart that Cheyenne Brown was found in on December 15th. So after this, his trial is going. He pled not guilty. His lawyer tried to say, like, oh, it was a coincidence that he was seen in the hotel with them, like he didn't kill them, but it only took the jury 30 minutes to say he was guilty. And they recommended maximum possible sentences for each crime. So the jury was not having it. No one believes the story that this was just a coincidence. So we know for a fact he killed 4 women. He's charged for them. He goes to prison, and he's currently in prison for these murders. But we also know that he attempted to kill a woman named Monica White. She has come forward and said that she met Anthony on a dating app. She had recently gone through a divorce. She signed up for dating apps, and she met him. And they end up starting to have a relationship. He says that he prefers older women, and she likes him. They start having a little bit of a relationship, and they ended up meeting in person. And at one point, he apparently tried to move in with her literally as soon as they met in person. But she was like, I don't know, that seems too fast, let's not do that yet. And a month after they met in person and he tried to move in with her, he ended up visiting again, but they ended up ending their relationship on bad terms about a week after his stay. And he was supposed to go home. She actually gave him money to send him back home because she was like, look, I just don't want to be with you anymore, this isn't working out. And he ended up not leaving. He stayed there for another week, and then he said, can you please come to a hotel? He was staying in Pennsylvania, by the way, that's where she lived. He's like, can you come to a hotel? I'll give you $500. And she declined, and the two never spoke again. And so it's very much believed that he would have attacked and killed her if she had gone to that hotel that night. And so luckily, because she said no, she survived, and she was never like attacked or killed by him. There are also 2 suspected victims of his. One is Sonia Champ. She was 40 years old. She lived in DC, and her body was found in mid-September of 2021, and her body was found in a shopping cart, and it was covered by a blanket. And at the time of her discovery, no one knew that Anthony was a serial killer. It wasn't until September of 2024, so 3 years after her death, Anthony's DNA was actually found on her body. And the likelihood of DNA belonging to another person being found on your body is 1 in 22 nonillion. That's the number 1, followed by 30 zeros. And so we have to say that this is a suspected victim because it's not yet been legally confirmed. There hasn't been a trial. He wasn't found guilty yet for her death. But the fact that his DNA was found on her body basically shows that he killed her. Additionally, another woman named Sky Allen was actually Anthony Robinson's ex-fiance, and she died in 2018 when she was 30 years old. Sky's mother had actually gone into her room. She thought she was awake. She found her barely breathing in her bedroom. She tried to call for help, but Sky ended up passing. After she had died, Sky's mom actually confronted Anthony, saying that like she didn't like him, and she actually asked him if he killed her daughter. And at the time he denied it, but she thinks that Anthony had something to do with it. She died in 2018, and again, we can't prove right now that Anthony killed her. The investigation is still ongoing. It is pretty likely that she was his first victim. And so he is a very scary guy, a very scary serial killer from Washington, DC.
Do you guys believe this man or not? Watch this comment and then see if you are right by the end of the video.
Because I couldn't get Valentine's Day off, we swapped cards upstairs. I gave her a kiss and a cuddle, got ready for work, and she was going to get her head down for another hour or so.
What does Joanne mean to you?
She's the only person I truly love. I want to know where she is. I want her back.
It was Valentine's Day 2005 in Hull. Joanne Nelson was a stunning 22-year-old woman who just always kept her friends and family on their toes. She was full of life, always laughing, always joking. She was kind of the type of girl that you never really knew what she was going to come out with next. Her friends described her as mischievous but lovable. But one thing that she always was reliable. Like, if she said that she was going to be somewhere, she would be there, especially work. Which is why it was so bizarre when she vanished. Now, her fiancé Paul reported her missing to the police when she failed to show up at work that day. He was like, it was so weird, we woke up on Valentine's Day together, we exchanged cards, and then she just vanished into thin air. She was supposed to drive to work, but I later on just found her car unlocked, and she obviously was nowhere to be seen. He was devastated. He went on national TV crying, begging for her to come back. But people were really suspicious of him early on, and honestly, it's so hard to tell, which is why I'm so interested whether you guys believe him or not. I've seen murderers get called out, rightly so, for acting really dodgy in interviews, but I've also seen innocent people be accused of doing horrific things and then get found innocent later. I'm like, can you really tell from somebody's interview whether they're telling the truth or not? Can you really trust body language? So everyone saw his interview and they were like, he just looks dodgy. And one thing that people really couldn't get past were the scratch marks on his hand. I don't know if the camera crew was zooming in on his hands on purpose to kind of emphasize the fact of, look, he's got scratches on his hands, but it certainly helped police. People were like, are those claw marks? Was Joanne trying to fight for her life? Paul was adamant though. He was like, we were a happy couple, we were engaged, we were planning a wedding, like, why would I kill my fiancé? But when police started looking into CCTV to try and retrace Joanne's last steps, they found something that they were not expecting. Footage of Paul, the day before she was reported missing, buying cleaning supplies and bin bags. Why do you need cleaning supplies and bin bags just before Valentine's, Paul? I'm going to guess you weren't just trying to be helpful around the house. And when police dug into Paul's past, they were absolutely horrified. He'd actually been married before, and his ex-wife had been through honestly hell and back with this man. He'd knocked her unconscious and even choked her to the point where she blacked out. And it seemed to run in the family because Paul's own dad was a killer. He'd actually stabbed somebody to death and spent time in prison. And just a couple of days after Joanne went missing, Paul spoke to one of his friends, and the friend was like, don't worry, mate. He was trying to reassure him. He was like, don't worry, she will come back. And you know what Paul said to this? No, she won't. I know she is dead and gone, and she's not coming back. Eventually, Paul was caught red-handed when his own mother reported him to the police. She said she knew for a fact that he'd actually confided in a friend that he killed Joanne. He admitted to strangling Joanne to death in an argument over laundry. He then wrapped her body in bin bags and drove miles to dispose of her body. But maybe the most chilling part of all of this is he actually pleaded guilty, so he only got 17 years behind bars. And unsettlingly for the people of Hull, he's now free.
She wanted to become the most prolific, dangerous, terrifying serial killer of all time. She wanted to murder more victims than anyone had before. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the case of Demeanor Cherry. Sarah M was born in Sweden to pretty normal, typical parents. She had a regular upbringing, she was able to make friends easily, and did really well in school. At some point within her childhood, Sarah's family decided to move over to Germany, and after this move, and as soon as Sarah hit her teen years, she started to drastically change. She started refusing to go to school, she would skive all of her lessons, she started to get in trouble with the police, and she was a huge attention seeker and a prolific liar. She would actually make up rumours about herself and spread them around the school so that everyone was talking about her. One of the rumours that she made up about herself was that she was a sex worker. She was very confrontational, aggressive, and on many occasions was sectioned, placed into a mental health facility against her own will. During one of the stints within the mental health facility, Sarah would be diagnosed with BPD, not bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder. This diagnosis is something that Sarah really struggled with, and she would actually post videos online voicing the struggles that she felt with this diagnosis. She also spoke about her struggle in mental health and that she had begun to inflict harm on herself. By the time she was 15 years old, Sarah had started to use really hard drugs, and I think the first one that she ever experimented with was E. And she developed an unhealthy obsession with serial killers, the Night Stalker specifically. She was obsessed, infatuated with Richard Ramirez. She would talk about him all the time. She had posters of him in her bedroom. She would share photos of him on her Instagram story, and he was even the wallpaper on her phone. To say that she idolized him would be an absolute understatement. Taking inspiration from him, she actually started to sport drawing pentagrams on her palms. Following a breakup from her boyfriend, the boyfriend actually broke up with Sarah because he was scared of her. Sarah decided that she was going to act upon one of her sick fantasies. She wanted to become the most dangerous, prolific, terrifying, deadly serial killer of all time. She wanted more victims than anyone else. Sarah downloaded an array of different dating apps, and she would create a profile under the name of Demeanor Cherry. She uploaded pictures of herself in sexy underwear and in suggestive and seductive poses, and she also wrote in her bio that she was a young teen. She was only 18 years old. She had never slept with anyone, and she was very interested in BDSM. Over the next 2 or 3 days, she would receive over 200 messages from men who were interested in her. Unbeknownst to them, she wasn't on these dating apps looking for love or even for a fling. She was on here hunting, scoping out for a victim. One of the men that reached out was 39-year-old Zayed. He was working as a security guard and was originally from Iraq. He had moved from Iraq around about 7 years before, but his visa was about to expire, and so soon he would be heading back to Iraq. Once he was there, he was planning on settling down, finding himself a wife and starting a family. He was described as very loving, he was a caring friend and a man who did everything for his family. He reached out to Sarah, and the first message that he sent her said, quote, "Are you the devil's bride?" The two arranged to meet in May 2021. Sarah told Zayed that her family owned a cabin deep in the woods in a very secluded area where they could go to get intimate with one another, where no one would find them and no one would disturb them. As Sarah sat waiting for Zayed to come and pick her up, she would send her friend a voice note saying, quote, "This is going to be my first kill." She expressed how nervous she felt and even asked her friend to wish her luck. The friend would later say that she never contacted the police when she received this message, because this was the type of thing that Sarah would say all the time, but she never followed through on it. Only this time, she was going to. She had full intentions of committing murder. Zayed picked up Sarah from a bus stop and she guided him to a back road. He is obviously believing that he is driving towards a cabin that doesn't exist. Only a couple of minutes into the drive on this back road, Sarah would ask Zayed to pull over, which he did. He didn't even get 2 seconds to ask her what was the matter, why did she want him to pull over, before Sarah pulled out a 12-inch knife that she had bought specifically for this reason. She would stab Zayed in the neck, hitting his jugular vein. An incredibly deadly injury. Miraculously, Zayed was actually able to fight back. He managed to disarm Sarah, getting the knife out of her hands, and using one of his hands, he would press down on the wound on his neck to try and stop all of the blood that was pouring and pouring out of him. Zayed then bolted. He escaped, running away from the car, making a beeline to the main road, where he flagged down a car for help. Meanwhile, Sarah had also fled. She didn't even consider for a second that Zayed would have been able to fight back. She thought that by stabbing him in the neck, she would have immediately debilitated him, and then that was that. There would be no fight, but it didn't go that way. She would make her way to a nearby town or village where she immediately stuck out like a sore thumb. She was covered in Zayed's blood after it had sprayed onto her when she pulled the knife out of his neck. She was wearing no shoes and she was muttering to herself over and over, quote, "I am a fucking killer." It didn't take long for the police to be called, and not even 30 minutes after the stabbing, Sarah was arrested. Described as being very emotionless and cold, and when she found out that Zayed wasn't dead, she said, "You know, it would be such a waste if I only went to jail for attempted murder. I had planned so much more." The officers even tried to give her a way out, asking if this was done in self-defense, and she said, quote, "No, I slashed his throat. I wanted to watch him die." Zayed, who was now in a coma, would be rushed to the hospital. However, 19 days later, he would succumb to his injury, dying in the hospital. Sarah was charged with first-degree murder, and her trial began in May 2022. Throughout the proceedings, she showed absolutely no sorry and no remorse. She would leave the trial every day and pose to the photographers, showing them the pentagram on her palm, giving a nod to her idol, Richard Ramirez. Due to her age at the time of the crime, she was only 18 years old. She was given what I think was a very lenient sentence. Sarah was handed 0 prison time, but must serve 12 years within a mental health facility. Because of the laws in Germany, the names in this case are aliases, so we do not know the real identity of Sarah, which is pretty ironic because she wanted to be the most famous serial killer in the entire world.